On the evening of October 2, 2020, a quiet town in Delaware would be shattered by a crime so chilling, it would leave scars on an entire community. At first, it seemed like an ordinary day. Madison Sparrow, a bright and caring 17-year-old, had plans to spend time with friends. She told her family she was heading out, carrying nothing more than her phone and the easy trust of youth. But what Madison didn't know was that she had been lured into a trap, one carefully set by the very people she thought she could trust. Madison was the kind of teenager everyone described as sweet, vibrant, and full of potential. She was close to her family, especially her mother, and carried herself with a kindness that made her unforgettable. But like many young people, Madison had her struggles, complicated friendships, relationships, and the challenges of high school life. At the center of her world was her ex-boyfriend, Noah Sharp, someone who had once been a source of comfort but had turned into a dangerous storm. In the weeks leading up to that night, tension had been brewing. Madison and Noah's relationship had ended, but Noah wasn't willing to let go. He had become obsessed, consumed with jealousy and control. And he wasn't alone. By his side was his cousin, Emma Cole, someone who not only enabled his darkness but became an active participant in what was about to unfold. On that Friday evening, Madison was tricked. Messages exchanged, words twisted. Noah and Emma had convinced her to meet up. Madison believed it would be a chance to clear the air, maybe find closure. But closure was never what they had in mind. As Madison made her way toward the meeting spot, she had no idea she was walking straight into a nightmare. When Madison didn't return home that night, her mother's worry quickly spiraled into panic. Hours ticked by, her calls went unanswered, and the silence grew unbearable. Madison wasn't the type to vanish without a word. Her family knew something was wrong. By the next morning, the fear had reached its peak, and Madison was reported missing. Police quickly launched a search, combing through the area, retracing Madison's steps and interviewing friends. Flyers were printed, calls were made, and the Sparrow family's quiet life was replaced with dread and unanswered questions. Where was Madison? Why had she disappeared so suddenly? As the investigation gained momentum, a chilling truth began to surface. Madison had indeed gone to meet Noah and Emma that night. And what began as suspicion would soon unravel into a story so horrifying that even seasoned detectives were shaken. But at this early stage, all anyone knew was that a vibrant young girl had vanished, and the clock was ticking. Somewhere out there, Madison was missing. And the question haunting everyone's mind was, would she ever be found alive? The search for Madison Sparrow consumed the community. Family, friends, and neighbors flooded the streets of Newark, Delaware, distributing flyers and calling out her name. Social media was filled with desperate pleas for help. Every hour that passed without news weighed heavily on her mother, her friends, and the investigators assigned to the case. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath. But while Madison's loved ones searched in hope, the truth was already far darker than they imagined. Investigators soon uncovered that the last people to see Madison alive were her ex-boyfriend, Noah Sharp, and his cousin, Emma Cole. At first, Noah downplayed his involvement, insisting that Madison had simply walked away. But detectives weren't convinced. Something about his story didn't add up. As officers dug deeper, Madison's digital trail told a different story. Text messages between Madison and Noah revealed that he had convinced her to meet that night. The tone of those messages was deceptively calm, almost friendly, exactly the kind of thing that would disarm a young girl who believed she was meeting someone she once trusted. For investigators, it was the first sign that Madison hadn't vanished on her own. She had been manipulated into showing up. Back at home, Madison's mother clung to hope. She refused to believe her daughter would just disappear without reason. But as days turned into a week, hope was slowly replaced with dread. Behind closed doors, detectives began to suspect the worst. Madison Sparrow might already be dead. Meanwhile, Noah and Emma were unraveling. Their calm facade began to crack under the pressure of questioning. At first, Emma echoed Noah's story, denying any wrongdoing. But whispers in the community hinted at something more sinister. Emma had been acting strangely, and those close to her noticed a disturbing shift in her behavior. She was nervous, evasive, and incapable of hiding the guilt bubbling beneath the surface. Then came the chilling discovery. Police tracked Noah's movements on the night Madison vanished, and their search led them to a remote wooded area outside Newark. There, in a shallow grave partially concealed by dirt and brush, They found what no one wanted to believe: the lifeless body of Madison Sparrow. The news devastated the community. Candlelight vigils replaced hopeful flyers, and the town of Newark mourned a young life cut short in a way too cruel to imagine. For Madison's mother, the grief was indescribable. Her world had been shattered, her daughter taken in a brutal and senseless act. As investigators pieced together what happened, the story grew darker still. Madison had not simply been killed in a moment of rage. She had been hunted, targeted, and betrayed by the very people she thought she could trust. Noah and Emma had lured her to that wooded area with a plan already in place. When confronted with the evidence, Noah cracked. His initial calm demeanor collapsed into frantic admissions. He confessed that he and Emma had attacked Madison together, ambushing her in the woods. Madison had fought for her life, but she had been overpowered. Emma's role, once thought secondary, was revealed to be active and brutal. She hadn't just stood by, she had participated. The betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was calculated, deliberate, and merciless. The community that had hoped for Madison's safe return was instead forced to face the chilling reality that a teenager's trust had been weaponized against her. And for investigators, the next step was clear: to bring Noah Sharp and Emma Cole to justice. The confession sent shockwaves through the community. The once quiet streets of Newark, Delaware, buzzed with anger, grief, and disbelief. Parents held their children closer, wondering how teenagers, barely adults themselves, could commit such a calculated act of violence. The town was no longer asking what happened to Madison Sparrow, they were asking why. Detectives began reconstructing the chain of events that led to Madison's death. The text messages between Madison and Noah revealed a carefully laid trap. Noah had reached out, pretending to want to talk, to reconcile, even to apologize. He played on Madison's kindness, knowing she would never refuse a meeting if she thought he was in trouble. Madison walked into the woods that night believing she was helping an old friend. Instead, she was walking toward her own execution. The details of the attack were chilling. According to Noah's own admission, he and Emma had waited in the dark woods, armed and ready. When Madison arrived, her trust was shattered in seconds. Noah struck first, but Emma wasn't merely a bystander. She joined in, ensuring that Madison stood no chance of escape. The betrayal was unbearable to imagine. Two people Madison knew, two people she once trusted, now conspiring to end her life. After the murder, Noah and Emma attempted to cover their tracks. They buried Madison's body in a shallow grave, believing the woods would conceal their crime. But guilt left cracks in their facade. Noah's nervous energy betrayed him during questioning, while Emma's silence raised suspicions. For investigators, it was only a matter of time before their lies collapsed. In the days that followed the discovery of Madison's body, prosecutors prepared to pursue the harshest charges possible. Noah Sharp was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. Emma Cole faced similar charges, her involvement undeniable. Both were teenagers, but their crimes were too severe for leniency. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy with grief. Madison's mother sat silently, clutching a framed photograph of her daughter. Her face carried the weight of unimaginable sorrow, but also a fierce determination to see justice served. Each detail revealed in court twisted the knife deeper. How Madison's trust had been exploited, how her life had been stolen, how she had fought for survival until her final breath. Noah's demeanor shifted as the trial progressed. The once confident young man now appeared hollow, his arrogance stripped away under the weight of his own words and the evidence piled against him. Emma, however, seemed trapped in a storm of denial. At times she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but at other times she clung to her cousin's version of events, as if refusing to admit her own guilt. The prosecution painted a grim picture: two teenagers plotting together, luring Madison to her death, and attempting to erase her existence by hiding her body. The defense tried desperately to argue that Emma was merely manipulated by Noah, a vulnerable accomplice rather than a mastermind. But the evidence suggested otherwise. Her role had been active, not passive. For the jury, the choice was agonizing but clear. Madison Sparrow had been betrayed, hunted, and killed in cold blood. The people responsible were sitting right in front of them. By the time closing arguments ended, the entire town waited with bated breath. The question was no longer if they would be punished, but how severely. The stage was set for the final judgment. And for Madison's family, Justice was the only thing left to cling to. The courtroom was silent as the jury returned. Days of testimony, countless pieces of evidence, and the painful recollections of witnesses all boiled down to this moment. Madison Sparrow's family held their breath, praying that justice would not slip through their fingers. The foreperson stood, voice steady but heavy with the weight of the decision. Noah Sharp, guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of possession of a deadly weapon. Emma Cole, guilty of murder and conspiracy. The words echoed like thunder, final and unshakable. Heather Sparrow, Madison's mother, wept quietly, clutching her daughter's photo to her chest. Her grief was endless, but for the first time since Madison vanished, there was also relief. The people who had taken her daughter's life would never walk free again. Her words to the press afterward cut through the sorrow like a beacon. Choose light, not darkness. Love conquers all. Noah showed no remorse. When the verdict was read, he turned to his mother and gave her a small smile, as if the reality of life without parole hadn't sunk in. Emma's tears flowed freely, but for many in the courtroom they were too late, mere echoes of a regret that couldn't undo the horror of what she had done. The judge's gavel came down with finality. Noah Sharp was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emma Cole, as a minor at the time of the crime, was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The law gave her a sliver of hope, but the shadow of her crime would follow her forever. Outside the courtroom, the community gathered. Hundreds who had once joined the search for Madison now came together to honor her memory. Vigils were held, candles flickering in the night, each flame a symbol of the light Madison brought into the world. Her school created a scholarship in her name, ensuring her spirit would continue to inspire others even in death. But for her family, the sentence was no victory. Justice did not bring Madison back. Her laughter, her dreams, her gentle presence, all had been stolen in one terrible moment of betrayal. What remained was the promise to keep her memory alive, to remind others of the dangers hidden in jealousy, obsession, and unchecked rage. The story of Madison Sparrow was not just about tragedy, it was about how love, even in the darkest times, endured. Heather Sparrow's words became the family's mantra, "Love wins." It was the message they carried into the future, the light they clung to in the endless shadow left behind. And so, in the quiet halls of Newark, where Madison once walked with her friends, her absence is still felt. Her story stands as a warning, a heartbreak, and a call for compassion in a world where innocence can be destroyed so quickly. Madison Sparrow's life was short, but her memory lives on, forever etched into the heart of her family, her community, and all who hear her story.